Yesterday, September 7th, 2025, El Salvador woke up to news that struck like a thunderclap, a shock that resonated across every corner of the country and resonated far beyond its borders. In an unprecedented operation inside the feared CECOT terrorist confinement center, security forces under the relentless shadow of President Nayib Bukele neutralized 144 gang members. They were identified as the most dangerous members of the Mara Salvatrucha and Barrio 18 gangs. The bodies, lined up in the prison's central courtyard under spotlights that cut through the darkness like knives, became a brutal message for all inmates. In El Salvador, defying the state means signing your death warrant. What triggered this ferocious response? How did the country reach this point where blood is shed as a warning? Stay until the end, because this story of power, blood, and control will leave you breathless. Imagine a place where the sun is a distant memory, where the concrete walls seem to close in on you, and the air is so thick with fear it feels like a noose around your neck. That is CECOT, a steel and cement fortress designed to bury alive the most feared criminals in Central America. Its 11-meter high steel-reinforced walls, electrified barbed wire, and high-definition cameras that capture every shadow turn any idea of rebellion into a shattered fantasy. But yesterday, something broke inside those walls. Rumors of a riot planned by 144 gang members, men with faces and bodies covered in tattoos that tell of lives of violence, reached the ears of the authorities. These inmates are locked up in Module 7, the most dangerous sector of CECOT. They believe they could challenge the system that had them trapped. They didn't know that their plan would unleash a response that would change the history of this prison forever. CECOT is no ordinary prison. Opened in 2023, it is the supreme symbol of Nayib Bukele's war against gangs. A 236,000 square meters megastructure that houses 40,000 inmates in conditions that many describe as hell on earth. Its 19 watchtowers, equipped with trained snipers and thermal imaging technology, make escape an impossible dream. Drones patrol the sky, motion sensors detect every step, and armed patrols patrol the perimeter day and night, ensuring there are no gaps in the system. Inside the 100 square meter cells, more than 100 people are crammed into metal beds without mattresses under artificial lights that never go out and stifling heat exceeding 35 degrees Celsius. Food is scarce, a meager ration of beans and tortillas that arrives once a day, and the water, when available, is often murky with an odor that inmates describe as unbearable. The dark, unventilated punishment cells are a dreaded fate for those who disobey. A place where time seems to stand still and the silence becomes an unbearable burden. Guards armed with automatic rifles and stun guns patrol the halls with absolute authority, and any sign of disobedience is met with a brutality that knows no bounds. The inmates, dressed in identical white uniforms, walk hunched over with their hands cuffed behind their backs, in silent lines under the constant surveillance of the guards. But even in this place designed to break the spirit, the Salvatrucha and Barrio 18, with their almost military discipline and a hierarchy that has survived decades of repression, found a way to resist. It all began weeks ago when the guards noticed a charged atmosphere in Module 7, as if a storm were brewing in the steel halls. The most bloodthirsty leaders, men with nicknames like the Crow, the Shadow, the Bull, the Hitman, the Ghost, and the Wolf, began planning a riot that reportedly sought to take control of the cell block and send a message to the outside, where gang cliques still operate in the shadows. They used improvised weapons, pieces of metal honed to razor-sharp edges, shards of concrete torn from the walls with chilling patience, even spoons filed against the floor into rudimentary daggers. Some, with the help of corrupt guards, managed to smuggle in tools hidden in food rations, in the soles of worn-out shoes, or even inside Bibles provided by religious groups visiting the prison. Reports speak of coded messages written on pieces of cloth hidden in clothing or whispered during supervised transfers that revealed a network of coordination that surprised even the most veteran guards. A hand-drawn map, found in a Bible marked security camera blind spots, guard changing times, and patrol routes. Gang members would spend entire nights. They honed in on these details, banging on walls in specific patterns to communicate without being detected by the hidden microphones in the cells. Their plan was ambitious. They wanted to take control of Module 7, neutralize the guards, and, according to some sources, demand better conditions, access to visits, an end to the punishment cells, and even the release of certain leaders. The planning wasn't limited to Module 7. Reports suggest that the gang members tried to extend their influence to Modules 5 and 9, where other MS-13 and Barrio 18 leaders were held. They used a code-based communication system where common words like water or light had hidden meanings, such as orders to attack or coordinate movements. With a patience that only desperation can engender, they managed to fashion improvised weapons from objects as simple as shards of broken glass from faulty light bulbs or pieces of metal torn from beds. Others, with the complicity of bribed guards, received small pieces of metal hidden in food rations, which they transformed into rudimentary weapons. An anonymous source within the CECOT revealed that the gang members even managed to sneak in a cell phone hidden in the sole of a shoe, which they used to coordinate with contacts in San Salvador, Santa Ana, San Miguel, Soyapango, and Apopa. This phone reportedly allowed the riot leaders to communicate with cliques outside the country, planning an action that would resonate far beyond the walls of the CECOT. The gang organization surprised authorities who believed that advanced technology and the constant surveillance of CECOT had eliminated any possibility of resistance, but the MS-13 and Barrio 18, with their experience operating under pressure, demonstrated that even in the most extreme conditions, their structure remained a threat. However, Bukele, always one step ahead, had already been alerted by prison intelligence. Guards under constant pressure had detected suspicious movements, inmates staying up late into the night, murmurs in the cells, and strange objects found during surprise searches. A guard who asked to remain anonymous for fear of reprisals confessed that he had received threats against his wife and children if he did not cooperate with the gang members. Another guard reportedly accepted a $5,000 bribe to allow the passage of tools and messages. A third guard, a young man recently recruited by CECOT, revealed under interrogation that he was offered $10,000 in exchange for ignoring certain suspicious activities during his nightly patrols. A fourth guard was found with a cell phone hidden in his uniform, which he used to transmit messages between gang members and their contacts on the outside. The corruption network, although small, was a loophole that gang members exploited but did not go unnoticed. Bukele, informed by an intelligence team that monitors every movement in and out of the prison, decided to act before the riots spread to other cells. On the night of September 7th, while El Salvador slept under a sky covered with dark clouds, a convoy of 25 armored vehicles escorted by helicopter gunships stealthily approached the gates of CECOT. The president, wearing his trademark black leather jacket and backward-facing cap, personally led the operation, a gesture that reinforces his image as a relentless and determined leader. Alongside him was the Immediate Reaction Unit, an elite group of the National Civil Police trained to deal with the most extreme situations. Drones began to fly over the prison, capturing every movement with night vision cameras, while searchlights illuminated the perimeter as if it were daytime. At 3 a.m., the silence of the prison was broken by the crash of the steel gates slamming open. The commandos, armed with state-of-the-art automatic rifles, smoke grenades, and bulletproof vests, stormed into Module 7 like an unstoppable force. The gang members, who were just beginning to organize their revolt, had no time to react. Some tried to resist, brandishing their improvised weapons, shouting insults, and throwing pieces of concrete. Others tried to hide in the corners of the cells behind the metal beds or in the makeshift bathrooms, but they were no match for the trained officers. In less than 10 minutes, the confrontation turned into a massacre. The 144 gang members, identified as the instigators of the riot, fell under the commandos' precise bursts. blood ran across the concrete floor, forming pools that reflected the prison's artificial lights. The screams of the rebels, filled with rage and despair, faded one by one as the AG. The entities advanced with surgical precision that left no room for error. The images captured by security cameras and drones that were soon leaked on social media show a chaotic but controlled scene. The commandos moved tactically, covering each other as they advanced through the hallways. Smoke grenades filled the air with a gray veil, disorienting the gang members, while gunshots echoed like thunder. The leaders of MS-1 and Barrio 18, men like Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios, alias Greenas de Stoner, and other leaders of the National Ramfla, the top brass of the gangs, were the first to fall. Their bodies, covered in tattoos recounting their criminal history, crosses, skulls, numbers representing murders, remained as a testament to the gang's defeat. Some tried to barricade themselves, in the cells using the beds as barricades, but commandos equipped with night vision goggles and stun grenades quickly located them. Others, in a desperate act, tried to run into the hallways, only to be hit by bursts from automatic rifles. Reports indicate that some gang members, when they found themselves surrounded, tried to surrender by raising their hands as a sign of their mission. But the commandos' order was clear: neutralize all the instigators without exception. The sound of gunfire reverberated off the concrete walls, mingling with the echo of military boots and the muffled screams of the gang members. The blood-spattered walls became a macabre canvas that narrated the end of the rebellion, but what came next was even more shocking. Bukele, present at the scene, gave an order that will resonate in the history of El Salvador. The bodies of the 144 gang members were moved to the central courtyard of the CECOT prison, an open space surrounded by the other inmates' cells. There, under the astonished gaze of thousands of prisoners, the bodies were lined up in rows, their disfigured faces and bloodied bodies displayed as a brutal reminder of the state's power. Guards, with hardened faces and guns in hand, patrolled the perimeter while the inmates watched in deathly silence. Some, with their hands clutched on the bars, could not tear their eyes away from the bruised bodies. Others closed their eyes as if trying to escape the reality around them. The air was thick with a metallic smell, a mixture of blood and sweat that permeated the courtyard. Some prisoners, according to witnesses, began to murmur prayers, while others remained motionless, paralyzed by fear. This was not an improvised act. Every detail was calculated to send a clear message. In El Salvador, no one defies the government and gets away with it. The operation sought not only to quell the rebellion, but also to destroy any hope of resistance within the CECOT. The gang members who had once sown terror in the streets of San Salvador, Santa Ana, San Miguel, Soyapango, Apopa, Santa Tecla, Caladinango, Usalutan, Sanzanet, La Libertad, San Vicente, Ahuachapan, La Union, Morazan, and Cabanas now stood as a symbol of the gang's total defeat. But how did it come to this? To understand, we must go back in time. Nayib Bukele assumed the presidency in 2019 with a promise that resonated in a country weary of violence. He was to eradicate the gangs that had turned El Salvador into one of the most dangerous countries in the world. The mayor of Atruca, born in the 1980s in the neighborhoods of Los Angeles and spreading like a cancer throughout Central America and Barrio 18. With its southern and revolutionary factions, they were his main enemies. With a history of extortion, contract killings, drug trafficking, and territorial control, these gangs had marked entire generations. Their members, easily recognizable by their tattoos and hierarchical structure, operated with a cruelty that seemed to defy all humanity. In 2015, El Salvador recorded a homicide rate of 103 per 100,000 inhabitants, a figure that placed it as the most violent country in the world outside of a war zone. Gangs controlled entire neighborhoods, extorting merchants, forcibly recruiting young people, and leaving a seemingly endless trail of blood. The streets of San Salvador, with its crowded markets and densely populated neighborhoods, were a battlefield where life was worthless. Merchants paid weekly fees to gangs in order to work. Students avoided certain routes to avoid recruitment, and families lived in constant fear of losing a loved one. In 2022, following a wave of violence that left 8 and 7 dead in 3 days, Bukele declared a state of emergency, a measure that suspended constitutional rights, such as the right to a lawyer or a speedy trial. This allowed for the mass arrest of more than 88,000 people have been arrested in the last 3 years, many of them sent to CECOT, the prison designed to hold the country's worst criminals. But not all those detained are guilty. Human rights organizations have reported that at least 26,000 people, including students, workers, pregnant women, the elderly, and even people with disabilities, have been arrested without solid evidence, victims of a system that prioritizes numbers over justice. These arbitrary arrests have drawn criticism both inside and outside El Salvador. But for many Salvadorans, the end justifies the means. Without a single murder reported. In 2024, El Salvador recorded a homicide rate of 1.2 per 100,000 inhabitants, the lowest in decades. But the price has been high. Prisons are on the verge of collapse, with overcrowding in prisons like Zacatecoluca reaching 300%. Reports speak of torture, deaths in custody, and arbitrary detentions. At the CECOT, National CECOT, prison, inmates live in conditions that some have described as hell on earth, with no access to sunlight, no blankets, and no hope of redemption. The isolation cells, where prisoners are chained hand and foot, are a place where time seems to stand still. The guards, armed with rifles and stun guns, patrol the halls with an attitude of absolute authority, and any sign of disobedience is punished with a brutality that knows no bounds. And now, with the 144 bodies lined up in the courtyard, the message is clear. There is no escape, either inside or outside the prison. Subscribe if you like the video, because this story is far from over. We'll continue to tell you what's happening in the depths of El Salvador. The September 7th operation wasn't just a response to a riot. It was a declaration of absolute power. Bukele, with his direct style and constant presence on social media, has capitalized on his image as an implacable leader in a country where violence was the norm. His promise of order and security resonates like a cry of hope for many. On the streets of San Salvador, the reaction was overwhelmingly supportive in neighborhoods like Soyapango, Cuscatancingo, Mexicanos, Apopa, Santa Tecla, Zacatecoluca, Ilopango, Calatenango, Usulután, Sonsonet, La Libertad, San Vicente, Ahuachapan, La Union, Morazan, and Cabanas, where MS-13 and Barrio 18 once controlled every corner. The news was received with relief. Mothers who lost their children at the hands of gangs, merchants who paid weekly extortion fees, and young people who grew up under constant threat from gangs. Everyone sees Bukele as a leader who has brought security back to a country that once lived in fear in communities like San Vicente, La Libertad, Morazan, and Cabanas, where gangs extorted even street vendors. People took to the streets to celebrate, thanking the president for his firm stance. In the markets of San Miguel, the plazas of Santa Ana, and the neighborhoods of San Salvador, Soyapango, Apopa, Santa Tecla, Calatenango, Usulután, and Sonsonet conversations revolved around Bukele, a man who, for many, is more than a president. He is a symbol of hope. But not everyone agrees. Human rights organizations have described the operation as a massacre, pointing out that the use of lethal force against unarmed inmates could constitute a crime against humanity abroad. The international community is watching with concern, while some sectors, especially in neighboring countries such as Guatemala and Honduras, applaud Bukele's approach in the United States, where the MS-13 has been identified as a transnational threat. Some politicians have praised the operation, although others have called for independent investigations. The recent agreement between El Salvador and the United States to receive deportees at CECOT in exchange for millions of dollars in funds has reinforced Bukele's image as a leader willing to negotiate, but also willing to act brutally when necessary. Rumors of a new corruption network within the prison have begun to circulate. Some say that gang members managed to organize the riot thanks to bribe guards. This is a wound that Bukele cannot afford to ignore. The internal investigation is already underway, and heads are expected to come down, not only among the inmates, but also among those responsible for security. A source close to the government revealed that at least 10 guards have been placed under investigation and are expected to face treason charges, a crime that in El Salvador can lead to decades in prison. Some of these guards reportedly received bribes ranging from $2,000 to $10,000, while others acted under false pretenses. Threats against their families. The investigation has also revealed that some gang members managed to communicate with the outside world using smuggled cell phones hidden in unlikely places such as inside the soles of shoes, in food packages, or even inside Bibles provided by religious groups. These phones were a key tool for maintaining communication with the cliques, the operational cells of MS-13 and Barrio 18, which still operate abroad in cities such as San Salvador, Santa Ana, San Miguel, Soyapango, Apopa, and others. Meanwhile, on the streets of San Salvador, life goes on. Children play in parks that were once gang territory. Merchants open their businesses without fear of extortion, and families walk at night without looking over their shoulders. In places like the San Miguel market, the plazas of Santa Ana, the neighborhoods of San Salvador, Soyapango, Apopa, Santa Tecla, Calatenango, Usalutan, Sanzanet, La Libertad, San Vicente, Ahuachapan, La Union, Morazan, and Cabanas. People speak of Bukele as a hero, a man who has achieved what no president before could: restore their peace. But deep down, they know that Bukele's peace is fragile, built on a balance of fear and control. What will happen if another riot breaks out? What will Bukele do if the MS-13 ovary 18 find a new way to challenge him? 4. Now, the CECOT courtyard remains a silent reminder of what awaits those who dare to try. The night of the operation. As the bodies were lined up in the courtyard, the other inmates watched from their cells, their hands clutching the bars. Some say the silence was so profound that the wind could be heard blowing through the walls. The gang members, who had once believed themselves untouchable, now understood there was no escape. Bukele, from the center of the courtyard, surrounded by his commandos, looked into the cells and uttered a phrase that has been repeated in every corner of the country. This is what awaits those who defy the state. No one knows for sure how profound the impact of this massacre will be inside the CECOT. Some experts believe it could unleash a new wave of violence, with gangs seeking revenge from abroad. Others think fear will paralyze the inmates, ensuring total government control. What is certain is that Bukele has sent a message to the world. In El Salvador, justice is swift, harsh, and without mercy. But not everything is so simple. The accusations of secret negotiations between Bukele's government and the MS-13, revealed by journalistic investigations, continue to cast a shadow over his administration between 2019 and 2021. High-ranking officials, such as prison director Osiris Luna, are said to have offered benefits to gang members in exchange for reducing homicides. These accusations, although denied by Bukele, raise questions about whether a heavy-handed approach is the president's only strategy. Was the September 7th operation a way to erase any trace of those negotiations? Or was it simply a response to a challenge he could not tolerate? Only time will tell. For now, CECOT remains a place where the sun doesn't shine, where days and nights blur together under the artificial light, and where prisoners live with the weight of knowing that any misstep could be their last. The 144 bodies in the courtyard are more than a warning. They are proof that Bukele is willing to do anything to maintain control. In the communities where the MS-13 and Barrio 18 once reigned, people breathe a sigh of relief, but also with caution. They know that gangs don't disappear so easily, and that every action by the government can have unpredictable consequences abroad. The international community watches with concern, while Bukele's allies, like certain sectors in the United States, applaud his heavy-handed approach. The 144 neutralized gang members are only part of this story. At its core, it's a fight for control, not just of the prisons, but of a country that has lived for too long under the shadow of violence. Bukele has won this battle, but the war is far from over. Subscribe if you liked the video, activate the bell, and don't miss what's next, because in El Salvador, every day brings a new surprise.